Jesus challenged the authority of the religious leaders of his day, which caused the religious leaders to resent and even hate Jesus. The religious leaders were known as the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Both the Pharisees and Sadducees were factions of the Jewish faith, which each had significant political power. While they shared many things in common, they differed on two main issues. First, the Sadducees believed in a literal interpretation of Scripture, while the Pharisees gave equal importance to oral tradition. Second, the Sadducees did not believe in an afterlife, while the Pharisees did. As a result, the Sadducees were more interested in political issues, while the Pharisees were more spiritually minded and were more interested in religious issues. Jesus was confronted by Pharisees on most occasions, and the Sadducees only took interest in Jesus after they felt that he was becoming a political threat. Jesus rebuked a number of different attitudes of these religious leaders. We will break these confrontations into 4 different categories and look at an example of each. First, the leaders sought the praise of men. Jesus condemned the Pharisees about this in Luke 11:43, where he says, "Woe to you Pharisees, because you love the most important seats in the synagogues and respectful greetings in the marketplaces." Rather than pleasing God, the Pharisees were worried about pleasing man. Instead of praising God, they sought their own praise. Second, the Pharisees focused on external rather than internal righteousness. Jesus addressed this in Luke 11:39, where he says, "Now then, you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness." The Pharisees were more concerned with appearing holy than actually being holy. This hypocrisy earned their condemnation from Jesus. Third, the leaders were more concerned with being religious and neglected the relational aspect of their faith. Jesus quotes from Isaiah in Mark 7:6-7 when he says, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules." God desires authentic worship that stems from a genuine relationship with Him. The Pharisees said the right things, but their hearts were far from God. Finally, because the Pharisees were only interested in appearing holy, they added a bunch of rules and guidelines to the Mosaic Law, which burdened the Jews and led them further away from God. Jesus used the Sabbath as an example time and time again. The Sabbath was originally given to Israel as an opportunity to have a day of rest once a week to focus on their relationship with God. But the Pharisees added many rules to this commandment that the Sabbath became more of a burden than a reward. For example, Jesus' disciples were hungry, so they ate some heads of grain in a field they were walking through. The Pharisees accused them of breaking the Sabbath because they were harvesting. Jesus argued that they did not break the Sabbath, but rather they broke the made-up rules regarding the Sabbath that the Pharisees invented. Jesus was more interested in keeping the commandments of God rather than those of the Pharisees. They missed the whole point of the Sabbath and caused their followers to resent God's commands rather than appreciate them. The religious leaders felt threatened by Jesus and resented his influence, so they conspired to kill him. They finally had an opening when Jesus' disciple, Judas, decided to betray him to the Pharisees. All this was done according to God's will, as Jesus' death was all part of God's divine plan to save humanity from sin and restore us to Him.